Hey everybody, welcome back. You know what time it is? It's time to talk about music. All of the favorite music of the year. 2021 brought us a lot of interesting, cool things. Uh, so much so that I had to create a list. And I had to alter that list a lot, many times. Lots of stuff bounced around on that list. Um, but I think I finally got it down. I got it down to where it ought to be. And we're going to talk about that tonight here at the Square the Circle Music Channel. I'm your pal, Mage, and we're going to talk about all things rock and roll and beyond. I hope that's okay with you. So, favorite music of 2021. Here we go. I made a list. I'm going to start down at number 10, and we're going to work our way up to number 1. I hope that sounds all right with you guys. Uh, Beginning with a release, an eponymous release, self-titled, a band that I came across on the internet. They don't necessarily have too much of a career going on because I don't believe that they are going to pursue their career in music whatsoever. I think this is kind of just like a secondary or tertiary idea for them. I think they all just kind of like coalesce and realize that they have a lot of like similar ideas and similar loves and tastes for things musical, and they just wanted to kind of like collaborate and make something, and then that was it. That's kind of what I gathered from researching them and looking into who they are and what they do. Anyway, this is a group. I think it's a trio of gentlemen from like kind of Central and Western Europe. I think they all individually hail from different countries, but I think primarily they make their base in and around somewhere, I think probably Denmark. I want to say Denmark or I want to say the Netherlands. I'm just going to say both of them. So they're either from Denmark or the Netherlands. This is a group called Codgerlingus. This is my number 10 pick of the year. Um, yeah, creative name, even more creative and funny cover art. This is a group that dabbles in all things psychedelic, stoner, garage rock, lots of, meanderings and interesting, things that are reminiscent of excellent hard rock and psychedelic rock from the 90s, like from America. Anyway, that's what I get from it. I hear lots of stuff that when I was a teenager in high school in the early 90s and mid 90s, this stuff reminds me a lot of what was going on here in the Pacific Northwest. And these guys probably really, loved it and were inspired by it too. Throughout the first 4 tracks is that's what you're getting. You're like getting like a real hard rock vibe of kind of Northwest, what people called grunge. They coined grunge. I think that's a silly, stupid word to describe a style, a regional dialect, if you will, style of music. But that's what we were given. So, yeah, that's what you kind of get throughout the first 2 sides. This is a lengthy album. It's a double LP. A and B sides, first disc, you have 3 tracks, and it's just kind of like standard, like I said, meanderings through kind of like psychedelic hard rock, some of it kind of sludgy, some of it a little bit more kind of like ingenuitive and progressive. There's lots of elements of like kind of prog rock in this. And then you get into the C and D side, the second disc. And the C side is like all one songs. My favorite song on the album. It's a lengthy song. I can't remember what it's called all the time. It's called Angels Were Murdered by Inquisitors. Yeah, dude, fucking awesome. It's like 15 minutes long. Super progressive in nature, heavy progressive. I'm not going to say it's like prog metal. There's not really a lot of metal stylings in these guys, but it gets pretty heavy. It gets pretty stony. If you like that kind of stony sludge, kind of psych garage sounding rock, you're going to get a lot of love from this. They sing in English, which is fantastic for anyone that only speaks English. That's what they're going for. So this guy, the singer, reminds me a lot of the guy from King Buffalo. If anyone that likes King Buffalo, there's definitely a lot of like King Buffalo style in this music. So this was my number 10 pick of the year. Everyone check out Codgerlingus. Good luck getting a hold of a copy of this. It's really hard to find. Like I said, these guys, I don't think they were intending to make a career out of rock music. Funny enough, Like, I tried to get a copy of this LP, couldn't find it anywhere. Finally found some random German website that was issuing copies of it, and I couldn't navigate through the website. I got frustrated. I sent them a message on their Bandcamp, and they, like, one of the band members got back to me and was like, "Yeah, sorry, man. Like, we actually didn't think that our music would even make it out of our country of origin. Like, they're like selling it in France and they're selling it in, like, in Holland and stuff like that." And he was honest with me, like, we didn't think anybody in America would ever know who we were or ever hear our music. And I was like, well, it's on the fucking internet, dude. Like, but whatever. They were super nice about it, but they couldn't help me get a copy of it. So months went down the road throughout the year, and I had it on my Discogs want list. And lo and behold, some dude in France had a copy of it and put it on sale for like $40, and I got a copy of it. So yeah, anyway, excellent fucking album. If anyone likes, like I said, the psychedelic hard rock, these guys, kind of monumental, groundbreaking stuff, but chances are not much more of this is going to come. So get it while it's hot. Check it out. That's number 10. Number 9 comes kind of within the same wheelhouse as the stuff we were just discussing. This stuff being also kind of like, your psychedelic, kind of heavier stoner rock, which I really love. Anyone that watches my channel will notice and see that I have a lot of, those types of bands and those types of groups that I talk about. I specifically really like that genre of music. Stuff that's kind of like a little bit more heavier and psychedelic than kind of your standard garage rock, but not quite of like the heavy metal end of the spectrum. Not that I don't love heavy metal. I fucking love heavy metal, but in my opinion, so often like these bands have a little bit more of like an ability and an era for experimentation and adding in some of these more alternative and more of these kind of like just experimental styles of rock and roll. Wherein if you're like a kind of a heavy metal band, you've only got a certain, I'm not trying to, debase it to anything specific, but you're working from just kind of like a little bit more kind of like a set palette of colors. Wherein if you kind of delve into the little bit lighter aspect of things and the more kind of just like psychedelic hard rock, the realm of experimentation is just a little bit more broad. So anyway, blah, 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 long-winded. This is a band that is in that same vein, like I said, and has a lot of those kind of like old world, yummy folk stylings to mix in with their heavier, psychedelic, stony sludge rock. This is a band called, forgive me, I'm gonna give it my best shot. Daliborovo Granje, I believe that's how you pronounce it. Daliborovo Granje. The album's called Heinen. I believe they are a band from the Czech Republic. Once again, sorry if that is incorrect. I should have researched this before I did the video. But anyway, they're somewhere from over there in Eastern Europe. And you can tell by listening to their music. It's awesome, hard rock, psychedelic, super cool, really great guitar work, very like, psych rock style, it's reminiscent of like, Jimi Hendrix and like the guitar greats, like ripping guitar shit, really great guitar work. But I think they're just a 3-piece. And then every now and again, you have really, really subtle interventions by some trumpet, just really mellow, awesome trumpet. And it's all instrumental. There's no vocalizations and very, very little trumpet. So most of what you're getting is the 3-piece rock and roll, but within that rock and roll, nothing is straightforward. It's all very intricate, unique. All the rhythms and all the stylings of the music are all totally inspired by the folk music of their region of the world. So very super cool. You get that, Macedonian style rhythms and tunes. You're hearing stuff out of like places like, Russia, Czechoslovakia, Hungary. Yeah, it's super fucking great. So everybody check this band out. Had to be way up, on my list of the top 10, number 9. Yeah, album's called Heinin. Beautiful photography. I'm not sure if this is actually like original, like old world photography or not, or maybe it's just, honestly, it looks like this guy could be like walking around the streets of Eugene, Oregon, like right now. But yeah, beautiful album. Incredibly beautiful. You can find this. It's not hard to find. You can order it online. I got this from their Bandcamp. It took a while. Actually, I think this album was released technically in 2020, very late in 2020, December of 2020, but it was not made available in LP format until like March of just this last year. So I'm considering it a 2021 release because I wasn't able to get a hard copy of it on wax till just this last year. So number 9 on my list, Dali Borovo Grande. Cool band, cool band. Okay, going to take everything into a little bit different place now for what would be number 8, right? Number 8 on my list. An artist that is well known on the label Sacred Bones Records, a label that I've mentioned quite a bit. Love them to death. They put out lots of really cool rock and roll stuff that's more kind of like darker inspired, kind of more unique, kind of like they do a lot of like cool like krautrock and you know, experimental electronica, things like that. Stuff that I would say just is kind of more on the cutting edge, artistically speaking, and it's not all real kind of straightforward rock and roll. Real experimental and, like I said, you know, kind of like cutting edge artists. But that's kind of what they're known for. This guy is a really wonderful, talented instrumental and synthesizer composer by the name of Daniel Davies. And this is an EP that he released midway through the year called Spies. So everybody research Daniel Davies. I believe this was a follow-up to a full-length LP that he released in 2020, or maybe it was early on, very early on in 2021. But this was kind of a follow-up EP to what could be considered kind of a concept album. I believe it was called Signals was the name of the album, but really awesome, stark photography, black and white on the cover. Makes it very recognizable, but also this one too, really cool, abstract, whatever you would call that, collage photography, just kind of just jumps out and bites you. It's really fucking great. But this is about 30 minutes of music and, you know, kind of goes everywhere. It starts out very low key. You just kind of have subtle synthesizer stylings reminiscent of like kind of what you would hear from like, you know, industrial music from the 90s, Nine Inch Nails, kind of like interesting, weird industrial sounds in the background, but in the foreground you have lots of just kind of subtle synthesizer moments, but it kind of goes a lot of different places. It goes into like more rock and roll, kind of like almost pop music moments. There was a little bit of sit-in help from the maestro great himself, John Carpenter. Did a little bit of work on this album with him. So yeah, this one just for me, it always stayed in the front. It was always on the top of the pile all year long. It's so palatable and so easily digested. It's something that you can put on, you know, and every time I would put it on, it wouldn't end up just being background music. I would get fully enveloped in it, whether you like it or not. You put it on and it's just gonna grab you. And it always did for me all throughout the year. So it just always stayed on the front of the pile. I love the album art. I love how it just kind of like works its way into the back of my head and just stays there. Yeah, a beautiful piece of work by Daniel Davies called Spies. I think it's kind of a themed musical piece, one long musical piece, kind of detailing the effect of basically a society under surveillance is kind of what, I mean, we all understand that as part of the world now, it's just become normalcy. But yeah, I think this is kind of a musical testament to that and its effects and what it's doing to us as a society and just living a life fully under surveillance. So everybody check this out. Really magnificent album. That's my number 8 pick. Spies by Daniel Davies on the Sacred Bones label. Okay, number 7 on the list. Shooting off into a completely different realm here. This is stuff, man, this was a recommendation that I received actually from watching a YouTube video from a fellow music review YouTuber guy He mentioned this on his channel. Sorry, I forget your name, but he mentioned this one on his YouTube channel, and I was like, oh, that looks really interesting. He gave it real high marks, and so I checked it out, and wow, very pleasantly surprised. I guess I wouldn't say surprised. I didn't know anything about this group, but hailing from the UK, a lot of music from the UK these days is just phenomenal. And so I checked it out, and this is an album by a band called Squid. The album's called Bright Green Fields. A band called Squid, hailing from the UK. This album is so much fucking fun to listen to. it's so fucking unique, and it's just wild. There's just little bits and pieces of everything. You can't put your finger on it. It's definitely rock and roll, but it's like it has all of those feelings and things that you would hear out of the 80s, kind of like no wave, pop punk, late 70s to early 80s, mixed with just really cool math rock kind of. It's really hard to put your finger on. Very cool. I think they're like a 4-piece band, maybe 5. Their drummer sings. Really fucking cool. And I wouldn't say, I mean, he sings, yes, but it's more of kind of like a almost spoken word, kind of like, the reviews I've heard is people immediately say, oh, he sounds just like the guy from the B-52s. And I guess I'm kind of like, yeah, a little bit at the very beginning. There's a track called GSK. It's the second track on the album. Technically, really the first. The intro song is not much. It's only about a minute and a half, and it's just kind of like some ambient sounds. But I think they're talking about, it also kind of has like kind of a dystopian kind of reality type of theme to the album. And I think that's what this first song is kind of laying out and detailing. But at the very beginning, when you first hear his voice, yeah, he kind of sounds like the guy from the B-52s a little bit. And then as it goes along, you don't really get that. And it's just really interesting, cool, ingenuitive. And the rhythms he's playing on his drums, he's a hell of a drummer, really good. And what he's doing vocally, it must be a real challenge, but you don't feel that strain. You don't hear the strain, I mean, that he's like trying to struggle with these lyrics and struggle with these vocalizations because he's trying to get his drumming out. It seems very fluid, and it seems very second nature, and it comes across sounding really awesome. I hear, like I said, a lot of that really awesome, like kind of pop punk, no wave kind of stuff that you hear coming out of like the late 70s, early 80s, Talking Heads, the band Television. I hear a lot of that. His vocal stylings remind me a lot of stuff from the latter decade, from like the early part of the 90s, when you have kind of like those underground alt bands like Modest Mouse. His voice reminds me, his singing style and his lyrics and everything remind me a ton of Isaac Brock from Modest Mouse. A lot of like Frank Black from the Pixies. So you kind of get where I'm coming from with this, There's subtle moments of like, I mean, the guitar playing is great, lots of synthesizer. There's funny little like, trumpets and things interjected. And with his like kind of talky type of singing, like you almost kind of like, am I listening to Cake? Remember that band Cake? Yeah, there's so many little bits and pieces to this band. It's such a fun fucking listen. And I don't know, fun is probably the wrong word to use, but it's the first word that comes to mind. It's just like, because it's not uplifting. It's not like, oh, this is fun, let's dance around. It's not like that. But it's definitely upbeat. But at the same time as being upbeat, it's kind of foreboding and almost kind of disturbing in a sense. The third track, I think, is probably my favorite song on the album. It's called Narrator. He's saying, I am my own narrator in my own head, in my own life. Really kind of cool, long, drawn out, kind of punk rock kind of song. He reminds me a lot of like, what Guy Picciotto and Ian MacKaye were doing in Fugazi, like in the late 80s and early 90s. Like that's what the song reminds me of. Really fucking great song. Really excellent album. This is my number, what did I say? Number 6, 10, 9, 8, 7. This is number 7 for me for the year. The band Squid and their album Bright Green Fields. Bright Green Field, no S. Excellent album. Everybody check it out. So yeah, moving on down the line, this would be number 6 on the list. An American band, finally. Yeah, American music these days. There's not a lot of stuff hitting for me. I don't know. Some of it slaps pretty good. This is one of those American groups that, to be quite honest, I did not fucking like this band when I first heard them. Everyone was, I felt like there was something wrong with me. I kind of always feel that way. Like there's something wrong with me, but everyone was really into this shit. I didn't get it when that album came out back in like, it would have been like probably 2014, 2015. Everyone was real up on it. I saw them at the Aftershock Festival in, where is that? Sacramento, California. Back in 2016 or something like that. They were fucking horrible. They were so loud. You couldn't distinguish anything that was going on stage. You couldn't hear any of the instruments. It just sounded like one loud wall of shit. And, you know, awful metal screams and just like, oh God, they were so terrible. So I kind of like had written this band off. And then I gave them another chance because this album came out. And man, I'm glad. I'm really glad I just decided to kind of like swallow my pride and give them another shot, because Deaf Heaven's new release from this last year, Infinite Granite. Holy shit. Talk about a whole new band. Everyone will say that. That's, you know, the most common thing everyone will say, but it's really true. They are almost like a whole new band. Just the kind of like beautiful elements of kind of, you know, synth pop and synth wave that they interjected to their sound. You still have all these wonderful moments of just kind of the hardcore, you know, black metal stuff, you know, the screams that you're getting, but it's also like really pieced together, really artistically and wonderfully. The album presentation, the absolutely lovely album art with this kind of like, you know, Big Bang expanding universe concept and idea. I love all the, you know, the graphic design of all this, all of the songs. The whole album from start to finish is just, it's really one long piece of beauty. Of course, my favorite song being the most famous song on the album that everyone knows, The Great Mass of Color, you know, but just, it takes me, it harkens back to that day, you know, the days of like kind of the early 2000s when, you know, rock and roll was like, there was bits and pieces of it that were getting really fucking awful. But then there was just kind of like those, you know, those stalwart artists that you knew that were still there, that were like kind of evolving with rock and roll, that were remaining kind of the way they were in the old days, keeping some of those aspects, but still evolving in a kind of a good way. This reminds me a lot of kind of that like evolution of like metal and hard rock and punk rock, when it started to evolve into something that was kind of like emo mixed with, you know, synth pop of the 80s. Specifically speaking, a lot of like what AFI was doing in the early 2000s with the like the Sing the Sorrow album and stuff like that. Everyone was like suddenly wearing mascara and shit again, and it's like, what the fuck is going on? But I love it. That's what this album reminds me a lot of, is that era in rock and roll. A lot of like the AFI and stuff like that. So anyway, this album by Deaf Heaven, when the Sunbather album came out, like I said, I was just like, what the fuck? Why is everybody into this shit? I can't get on board. But I don't know. They reinvented themselves, in my opinion, and this album is testament to a lot of hard work and a lot of great sound. You can just take a bath in this album. Sonically, the production and everything, it is just so beautiful. It's produced so beautifully. So yeah, everyone really needs to check this one out. It's fucking magnificent. Deaf Heaven's Infinite Granite is my number 6 album of the year, right? 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. I'm not so good at counting backwards, I've come to find. Yeah. Okay. I think what I should do now is probably do a short list of special mentions. These are albums that all throughout the year, I listened to so much, and a couple of them, quite a few of them, were kind of bouncing off and on the top 10 list. And I just couldn't, it was so hard to devise the list. And these ones were ones that just didn't quite make it. And so I wanted to give them some special attention just because I want you all to check them out because they're fantastic fucking albums. So, first one being an amazing band. Amazing. They're actually just a duo. They're so fucking awesome. They are called Sungazer. And the album is called Perihelion. This is a duo from, I believe, Brooklyn, New York. It's a drummer and a dude that, you know, does all the other instrumentations, which is like, you know, guitar, bass, synthesizer, you know, samples, beats, all kinds of, I mean, they all do everything, but the shit their drummer's doing probably doesn't leave him a lot of extra, you know, ability to be able to like mess around with like, you know, samples or anything like that. But it is like, just like insane math rock mixed with hip hop, R&B, spoken word, just really eclectic, really super cool shit. This album is it rips in every way, shape, and form. So everybody check out Sungazer and their album Perihelion. Next one being a really awesome hard rock band called Space Lord. Space Lord. And what was their album called? False Dawn. Really fucking cool album. Really excellent mix. Like I said, kind of hard, it's just hard rock, staple, kind of blues. What you get, just kind of like the mix of excellent 90s rock. The singer reminds me a lot of Chris Cornell, but then mixed with kind of like not so dark version of like what, you know, Chris Cornell and Kim Thayil in Soundgarden. They were heavily influenced by kind of like the more metal stuff, like, you know, Black Sabbath and whatnot. This is kind of like that, but more influenced by kind of the more hippie-ish, kind of folksy world of like, you know, like Led Zeppelin and shit. So you have that great amalgam of like kind of the hippie mixed with, you know, metal. They're fucking awesome. So check out Space Lord and their album False Dawn. Another one being in the same kind of vein, like, but not so bluesy, more kind of just like psychedelic kind of stoner jam rock. They're a band called Hurlant. The album's called Debris. They're a French band. Everybody check them out. Super fucking cool. Yeah, definitely worth your time if you're into like kind of the psych rock, you know, drippy, stony jam kind of stuff. And another one, this guy, it's one guy. This music is made by one individual. This guy was on my top 10 for a long time until a few pieces kind of bounced him off. But one guy makes, like, he plays all the instruments, drums, guitar, bass, everything. It's instrumental, so there's no singing, but it's he calls himself Hairless Monk. And he released an album called The Ether Whale just this last year. Fucking incredible progressive metal, like kind of artsy metal, like progressive stuff, like the band I've mentioned a lot that I love dearly called Elder, very reminiscent of the band Elder. So if you're into Elder or you're into that type of like prog metal stuff, you'll love Hairless Monk and his album called The Ether Whale. Check that shit out. And the last one on my special mention list that I really wanted to give some special props to, because I love both of these bands so dearly. Back in, you know, like just out of college and back when I was just like kind of at the bar every day and just like drinking all the time, I love, these guys were one of my favorite bands. And they're just kind of like a lo-fi alt-rock band. They were on the Sub Pop label for years and years and years. They've been around for 20 plus years. They're fucking fantastic. They're called Fruit Bats. So if anybody's ever heard of the band Fruit Bats, dude, check it out. They did an entire homage and they covered the entire album of Smashing Pumpkins' amazing classic Siamese Dream. And they do it so much justice. It's fucking amazing. It's just, like I said, it's like really low-key Americana lo-fi style, but of Billy Corgan's just like insane fuck you in the face, like power guitar, album. So the juxtaposition of the two, it does it so much justice. It's really fucking fantastic because Billy Corgan is just an incredible songwriter. Everyone knows of just the monumental, abilities of Billy Corgan and how much incredible album Siamese Dream is and was. And them just doing like a really quirky, fun, ingenuitive homage to it. It's fantastic. So you can get that out there too. It's just titled Siamese Dream, but by Fruit Bats. So everybody check that out. So there it is. Those are my special mentions for the year 2021. Everybody go out and get those selections as well. They just didn't quite make the very upper echelon of what I'm going into. So now here we are. We're getting into the very tippy top 5. I think that's what I got left, right? The top 5, if my math is correct, counting backwards. Here is a magnificent album that has been with me pretty much since the beginning of the year. It's so beautiful, kind of off the beaten path, but if anyone watches my channel, they know of my love and taste for ambient music and folk music and instrumental and all things like that. These guys really tug at my heartstrings. They're a band called Turnin. I believe that's how you pronounce it. Thurnin. I think it's Turnin. Turnin. And their album Menhir. It is a neo-folk, kind of dark folk, but it's neo-folk. And it's all performed by one individual, one gentleman, who plays all the instruments, and it's all just 6-string guitar, acoustic guitar. There's some harp, there's some other real subtle instruments, but it's nothing usually any more than just like dueling guitar sounds. And so he'll record all one, there's numerous songs, there's at least 10 songs on this album, and he'll play the whole song through and then do a second part, double his own guitar playing. And it's just, just the most beautiful, surreal. I mean, look at the album art. I mean, that's what sells you sometimes. That's what sold me. That's what made me click on it, and I found it. Unfortunately, not offered on LP format, but the CD was affordable and beautiful. I believe it's out of. I think this one's out of the Netherlands as well. I think this is a group or a man from the Netherlands. So, but yeah, just check it out. It's so great. Beautiful guitar folk. Very subtle, very sweet. The production value is gorgeous. It's just like you literally feel like you're sitting right next to that, monolithic stone, tucked somewhere in the middle of, Central Europe. I don't know. It's just gorgeous. So it's been with me all year long. It had to be on my top 10. I love this kind of stuff. Very ethereal, beautiful music. You can play it all hours, any day of the week, morning, noon, and night. While you're in the shower, while you're at work, while you're cooking dinner, whatever. It's just kind of an everything all the time, all-encompassing, beautiful piece of musicianship. So, yeah, fantastic album. Everybody check it out. Menhir by a group called Turnin. All right, that's number 5. Now, here we are, number 4. Another French band. This band hails from Bordeaux. This is a trio of dudes from Bordeaux that play some really, really cool hard rock flavored with that that flavor that I love so much. It really reeks of the alt rock 90s in America. Pacific Northwest sound, kind of. I wouldn't say really the Pacific Northwest sound, but just definitely that alt rock from the 90s type of flair, with moments that are far more dark and sinister and almost kind of like doom metal. But they're a trio, and their guitar sounds are not developed to the point where they're like a really low, sludgy, tons of distortion, tons of filtered guitar sound. Their guitar sounds are still very kind of edgy and raw and almost kind of more punk rock inspired. So you don't get that really like impending doom metal sound, but it's still really dark and foreboding. And that kind of comes from the subject matter. This is a band, like I said, from France called Little Jimmy. Album called The Cantos. And it's basically an elaborate storyboard, starting with the first cantos all the way to the last cantos. The songs are named specifically, like they have their own titles, but I know that the first and last track is called First Cantos, Last Cantos. And it basically is. It's a story detailing about our young man, our hero, little Jimmy, and he summons a demon and goes throughout basically the 7 levels of hell or something like that with his demon friend to help him along. It's really fucking great. And it's really cool, raw, organic kind of punk, alt rock sounding music. There's 2 of the guys sing. They're really excellent at, call and response, and their voices sound very similar. And the harmonies are fantastic. Moments of really cool, like doomy sludge stuff, but also some really more kind of like upbeat, poppy alt rock kind of sounds. Vocalizations reminiscent of Perry Farrell from Jane's Addiction kind of sounding. Really fucking great. Really cool album. I love the overall presentation, the art design, everything about this album is just super fucking fun. They sing in English. It's really great. Everyone check this out. It's just a fun little journey. Sonically speaking too, you get it in your headphones and there's all kinds of wild shit like going on in there. It's really cool. It sounds so simplistic and kind of just raw, just kind of up front. But if you get into your headphones and you put it in there, like there's a lot going on. Really cool. So yeah, this was way up there on the list for me. This was one of those that kind of like bounced around a lot. Started at the bottom when I first discovered it, and then it just slowly kind of just like was bumping shit out of the way and just making its way up the ladder. And I could get into detail about all the individual songs on this, but I don't think I need to. It just, I don't want to drag this this episode out any longer than it really truly needs to be. But yeah, number 4 on my list, a French band called Little Jimmy, and their album, The Cantos. Fucking excellent. Everybody check it out. Get yourself some. Okay, coming down to the last little bit here. I think it's probably time that I slow down for one more second and do one more special mention part of this video. More than just special mentions, these are honorary mentions. I have 2 of them, and these are albums that they were on my top 10 list at some point in time during the year, and I wouldn't say they got bumped out of position by anybody per se, but I knew I wanted them to remain on the top 10 list in some way, shape, or fashion. But there was so much other great music that just really had to be up there. You get where I'm coming at, but these 2 are so epic in proportion and deserve so much of that kind of, like I said, that honorable status. I think you already know where I'm going here, because this album was bridging the gap in so many ways for so many people throughout this year. For the young and the old, for the people who love and respect all forms of music and all genres and all different types and all that stuff. It was just kind of like every time I saw it or talked to anyone about it or researched it or anything, it would be on like Johnny Q, random dude in, the UK, 20 years old. It would be on his top list. And then it would be on like some dude here in the States, some 70-year-old guy who's doing a video about best this and that. You know what I mean? It just kind of like is bridging that gap between all of our sensibilities and all these many generations of men, women, people, all alike, all age groups, all cultures. This is one of those albums that can be reached by everyone. It can reach everyone, and it's such a fucking great album, and it just needed to be mentioned because it's mentioned on everybody else's list. So of course I'm talking about the Promises album. Of course, the godfather of spiritual and soul jazz, Pharoah Sanders, and his enigmatic performances all throughout history. This is just the tippy top candle on the the icing of the immense beautiful cake that he has made throughout his career and everyone else's lives. And somebody that I have never heard of, surprisingly. I love ambient music and electronic type of music, and I've never heard of Floating Points, or the gentleman who just goes by that moniker, Floating Points. I can't remember his name. Anyway, it doesn't matter, because these two, of course, are a match made in heaven. Just the beginning, establishing that theme, that very simple, and keeping that through the whole thing, and how simple it is, but how this album doesn't get stale and it doesn't get dull and boring, because throughout the first 6 parts, it's just continually adding and adding to this patchwork, this pastiche of beautiful meanderings through just whatever psychedelic landscape. That's what this album feels like to me. It's just like a magical psychedelic landscape. I generally am not a fan of saxophone jazz. I've made that known on these videos that I do. Anyone that has watched my videos knows that I'm not a big fan of classic style, like bebop jazz or swing jazz or anything like that is like really heavily dominated, especially by saxophone. It's just, to my ear and to my sensibilities, it's almost like nails on a chalkboard. The tenor sax sound, I mean, because some sax players are so lackluster and so dull and just don't, either they're playing way too much, or it's just, I don't know. I won't go off about that, but I love and respect what Pharoah Sanders does. I love his style. I love how his horn sounds. His horn's older than he is. I know it is. It's probably an 80 or 90-year-old saxophone. And you can hear that. You can hear his air, kind of an airy, open jawed kind of, really, there's just a lot of acoustic sound going into what he's doing. And it has so much personality, his playing style, and the tones that are coming out of his horn. It's got so much personality. I fucking love it. It's so great. That part in, like, I think it's the 3rd movement or maybe the 4th movement, when he just puts his sax down, and he's not singing, he's not scatting, he's just doing with his mouth and jaw what he would naturally be doing with his horn in his mouth. But so he's playing, but it's coming out just as vocalizations. It's just so beautiful. And as it drips and trips along the pathway, you flip the B-side, and parts like 6 through 9 or whatever it is, is the introduction of the London Symphony Orchestra. And that is just, I mean, yeah, it's just gorgeous. That's my favorite part about the album, is when the symphony is introduced. It just goes to the moon and back. It's so gorgeous. The final part, just kind of like a slow exit into low ambient nothingness. What a great fucking album. It had to be on my top 10, and just with so many other great rock bands and other things going on, I knew there would be a place for this. I didn't want to push it off the top 10. So it's one of the honorable mentions for the year for me. So I know you all loved it, and I know everybody enjoyed it. It's on everybody's top 10 list. So it definitely deserves to be there. It's going down in history as one of the greatest albums, really, of our time. So hooray for that. The other honorable mention being, an individual that I've mentioned before. We just lost him late in 2020. I'm talking about, of course, the timeless and enigmatic Harold Budd. Harold Budd died late 2020. And so in 2021, the world obviously knew that he needed to be remembered in a lot of different ways. This is one way to remember him. A lot of his fantastic music that he did the late 70s, all throughout the 80s, and even into the early 90s, were all patched together and put on a soundtrack for this excellent film that debuted on HBO. I Know This Much Is True, starring Mark Ruffalo. If anyone hasn't seen the movie, watch the movie. Woo, it's tough. It's a tough one, but it's well worth watching. It's just a piece of art in itself. To be quite honest, I was kind of surprised. The music of Harold Budd doesn't really break through in the actual movie like that much. I was really hoping, because he's such an enigmatic, like I said, an atmospheric artist with his, like, soft pedal style, and just it's so airy and atmospheric and dreamy. You would think a movie like this, it would really pervade and just kind of like be all encompassing and be everywhere in every scene. Every scene you see Mark Ruffalo walking into the hospital, and you hear Harold Budd's, enigmatic piano just kind of like haunting the hallways. And it wasn't like that. It was actually, there was more of just kind of like pop music standards like going throughout the whole show. So I watched the show kind of expecting to really get the feel that the same feeling I get when I listen to Harold Budd's music. It didn't necessarily cross over like that for me. For me personally, I don't know how everyone else thought about it, but when you read the extensive liner notes in this, it talks about how the man who made the film was really truly inspired by the music of Harold Budd in a lot of ways. And he said that he hadn't even really begun to create the storyboard until his driver was driving him across town and was playing the Pavilion of Dreams, on the radio or whatever. And he's like, what fucking music is this? What is this? And the guy's like, it's Harold Budd. And that's what inspired him to start writing this story, So I kind of expected the music to, like I said, really pervade more into the show, but it didn't. Anyway, that doesn't matter. That's just my opinion. This is just all selections of the major part of his career, 1979 through like 1990 something. It's all stuff that can be found on the predominance of his albums. And I think there's really only, I don't remember specifically which selections, because they're all just, the titles are just, selections from the show. I think there's like 3 selections on here that are stuff that has never been released, only released posthumously after he died, specifically for this. So, but anyone that's a big fan of Harold Budd and a big fan of his style and what he did and what he gave to the world, this is an excellent album to buy, because it's basically a greatest hits album. It's a Harold Budd's greatest hits album. A lot of the most famous stuff from, like, Pavilions and from White Arcades, and even a selection or 2 from stuff that he did with Brian Eno from the Pearl album. Yeah, it's got everything. So everybody, this is an honorable mention for the year. Really fantastic. Everyone should get it. It's highly affordable, easy to get. So there it is. Honorable mentions for the year 2021. I hope everyone had an excellent year. I hope it was doable. Yeah, it was doable. I don't know. We'll see how 2022 treats us. We all got to start treating each other a little bit better. I'll tell you that much. That's the only way we're going to get through all this shit, everybody. So let's drop all that garbage and let's just get to the top of the heap. Here we are. Top 3. These are my top 3 albums of 2021. Number 3. This is another band from the UK. When I discovered this group, I heard one song and I immediately rushed online to download the whole album to find it. And I don't normally do this. I put the album on and I listened to the whole thing intently, nonstop. And it wasn't just because I was entranced and in love with the singer. The music is so fucking good. These are a group of musicians that I'm kind of blown away that I haven't heard a ton of people here in the States, at least, talking about them nonstop. They're the next big thing, if you ask me, because they encompass all those things that you would think everybody loves. Like they have pop sensibility, and they should and could be on American radio, and they rock, and they're ingenuitive, and they're artistic and creative. It's not boring. And their singer is gorgeous, and she's beautiful. She has an amazing, absolutely stunning, beautiful voice. We're talking like kind of husky, alto voice, very versatile, very powerful voice. And that's what gets you by in the world of rock and roll, is by having, some balls. This girl's got some balls. I'm talking about the UK rock and roll outfit called Wolf Alice. This album is called Blue Weekend. Wolf Alice and these guys just fucking kill it. They kill it, beginning to end. It's just amazing. I was just taken away. I was instantaneously in love because of how powerful it truly is. The music's excellent. Like I said, it's very, very ingenuitive, and it's just rock and roll, but it's not fucking boring, and it's not the same old rock and roll. The players very talented, and her voice just sells the band. Just gorgeous, reminiscent of. I get a lot of feelings of like Kate Bush, Norma Fraser. I believe that's her name, Norma Fraser, the female vocalist from Cockatoo Twins. And that's a lot of what the music too. It's got that. There's a lot of elements of like dream pop, kind of shoegazy, but it's all, a lot of it's all really mostly kind of like upbeat. It's not really kind of like sad, sappy shoegaze. It's just really dream poppy. But her voice is so powerful. So you get like that Cockatoo Twins, Norma Fraser, soft, like vibrato, but still really in your face, Kate Bush, just like, so amazing. The first side of the album really just plays out like it's kind of a standard rock record, and you're like, wow, this is really fucking good. And then game over, dude. B-side, first track on the B-side. The song is called How Can I Make It Okay? It will drop you to your knees. Absolutely drop you to your knees. She is doubling her own vocal parts with these harmonies that it will send you home crying to your mom. So beautiful. Like I said, that husky, powerful voice. In moments, a lot reminds me of stuff I grew up on. I mean, not really, I didn't grow up on, but, important and powerful female vocalists of the time, of like the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, like reminds me a lot of Katie Lang. So you have like that kind of like, there's not really any honky tonk stylings in there, but you know what I mean? Just that really like hyper powerful feminine quality to it. Like just really, it's so gorgeous. That song especially, How Can I Make It Okay? It's fucking fabulous. There's probably only one track on this album where I'm kind of like, man, whatever. It's in there. It's cool and all. It's kind of the homage track to, like I said, the kind of that 90s alt rock, girl power kind of thing. It reminds me a lot of like the group L7 from the 90s, if anyone remembers that group L7. Just real like fuck your face, punk rock chick attitude. It's great. It's cool. It's a cool song. It's just, it's not one of my favorite songs on the album, but that's really the only song on the album where I could like, kind of like give or take. I could probably skip it, just being honest, but whatever. This album's fucking magnificent. So everybody check this album out. Blue Weekend by the band Wolf Alice. Superb album. Kind of surprised myself, honestly, with that one. I was just like, wow, taken aback by just how gorgeous her voice was. And then usually it's like, okay, that sells it, but that wasn't it that sold it. It was like the musicians in the group, dude, the guys they're amazing. It's such great music. So everybody check that out. Working up our way here. Number two on the list. We're getting close, guys. Number 2 is the only band on this list for me that has made an appearance on one of my other episodes this year. So they stuck around for the long haul, and they made it all the way up to place number 2, and they deserve it. It is the band I hyped up big time earlier on in the year. They're called Genghis Tron, and their album Dream Weapon. Relapse Records, this shit is so immense and so fucking awesome. It takes you to so many places. I love all of the atmospheres and tropes that you get from the stylings of the 90s. That's just kind of where we're at now. That's where we're at in, the generation the gap has already like rainbowed over, and now bands are making music that was like, their inspirations come from when I was a teenager, in the 90s. And you can tell these bands are heavily inspired by those 90s alt groups. Bands like, I hear a ton of the band Filter in this album. I hear a lot of like other like industrial giants, heavy rock, hard rock, metal giants of the 90s, Nine Inch Nails, Fear Factory, yeah, lots of that stuff. But this one is more just kind of like a more kind of uplifting, positive vibe than the real kind of like, down feeling kind of like drudgery of like what Nine Inch Nails was purveying and stuff like that in the 90s. But yeah, all the instrumentation, the drummer in the vocalist is amazing. You have just like huge like power synth driven stuff, synth wave, dark wave, super fucking cool. I don't know, the entire artistic display of the album, all the artwork, super beautiful. This is like a sunken some sort of architecture like sunken underwater or something like that. This is all hand sketch, pencil sketch style 3D work that somebody did. It's just gorgeous. I love this album to death. Favorite track on the album, well, numerous, all of them are fucking great, but I think Pyrocene, or the final track, Great Mother. Oh man, yeah, the final track, Great Mother, is probably my favorite song on the album, but it's so intense and so just driving and yeah, perfect fucking album for a road trip. So much can be said about this album. Everybody rush out and get it. If you love anything about rock and roll, kind of the more heavy driving, smart rock, and there's lots of like intricate rhythms, and it's kind of math rocky, but not to the point where it's obnoxious. Like they're just trying to fuck with you. It's not music just to fuck with the head of the listener. It's definitely pop sensible in moments. Yeah, it's magnificent. It's my number 2 pick of the year. So everybody go out and get Genghis Tron's big heavy hit, Dream Weapon. That's it, everybody. I'm down to it. This is the very last one. And I feel I feel kind of shitty about this because I've got nothing to hold up for it. This album came out just about, it was the first week of November. I had heard it prior to it being released, and it absolutely knocked my fucking socks off. This band, they only have one release prior to this album. They're another French band. They're from France. And I guess, in lots of parts of the world, in Europe, everywhere, really, raw materials and sourcing things, it's difficult. It's difficult to do. And so they released their album and put a date on everything, but then unfortunately couldn't back it up. And so I ordered a copy of their album on LP, and it hasn't come. It's probably not going to come for a long time. But my favorite album of the year is the album Meandering Soul by a band called Jin. That's DJIIN. They're a French band. Holy fucking shit. They've got 4 people in the band. They have a woman lead singer. She plays like electric harp and has the most harrowing, gut-wrenching, piercing, amazingly cool fucking voice. Super deep, smoking, like husky voice, and then goes into like these insane, like crazy metal screams, like she's possessed. Like it's super cool, like gypsy witch music. Like, but all the stuff that they're playing is just, it's, I don't know, it's hard rock. There's moments and aspects and elements that are like, similar to like what Black Sabbath was doing in the early days, like the first album, like the Black Sabbath album. And then some elements that are very kind of like folky Like I said, I use the term gypsy kind of lightly, and I don't mean anything negative by it. I just mean like it has that sound of just kind of like folksy kind of gypsy music, you know? Yeah, just like heavy metal mixed with gypsy music mixed with, you know, it's got that like kind of Central and Eastern European kind of flair to it, but it's still just like heavy metal. There's doomish moments to it. The second to last track, no, it's the final track. The final track on the album, I can't remember what it's called. Um, Actually, I think it's called Meandering Soul. I think it's the title track. Um, it's like a 10-minute, like it's very, very 70s prog inspired. There's so many inspirations you can tell with this band, like huge 70s psychedelic and progressive rock inspiration. But yeah, what a band. Everything about them is just fan-fucking-tastic. I entreat you all to get online and check it out. I feel so guilty I have nothing to hold up. But the artwork is gorgeous, really beautiful painting. Um, and yeah, everything about it, it's so hard when you get to your favorite album of the year and you're just kind of like, you know, you're tongue-tied about the whole thing. Um, it's enigmatic, you know what I mean? It's just got that feel to it where it's so difficult to explain, and it takes you so deep. It's so enthralling and involving, and it leaves you nearly breathless. The first track is it's kind of got that, like I said, that kind of like gypsy, kind of like swirling, kind of like whirling dervish kind of sound. And it's kind of like a standard rock song in parts, but then it opens up and segues into the second song. It's called The Void. And that just begins with like kind of like open electric guitar. And it's got really interesting rhythms in it. Third and fourth tracks, just kind of more heavy, hard, psychedelic rock. Yeah, I'm not going to even try to like go through the whole thing and just lay it all out. It's beautiful. Everyone should take a listen. It just involves so many elements of rock and roll that I really love. So if anyone's a big fan of like, you know, proto metal, psychedelic metal, hard rock, prog rock, you're going to love the shit out of Gin, the French band Gin, and their most recent release just came out a couple months ago. It's called Meandering Soul. So that's it. That's my number one pick. That was my top 10. Yeah, I guess I don't have a lot more to say. I hope everyone enjoyed that. Get in the comments below and tell me about your top 10. What did I miss? What should I be listening to? Thank you all very much for tuning in throughout the year. I've almost been on YouTube for like almost a year now. So this has been fun. I love knowing that like, you know, I had a top 10 in 2020 and now I'm doing another top 10 almost a whole year later. Gotten pretty close to the 100 subscriber mark. So once again, thank you all very much. I know that's really nothing, but it's kind of neat to look at and kind of neat to know that like there's like, you know, 100 people out there that check out my videos. It's kind of cool. So yeah, multiple thousands of views, and everyone seems to really like the videos about prog rock, which makes me really happy. I love that. It's like it's probably my favorite genre of music. And so it's really been happy and cool for me to like see that all the videos I do about prog rock are getting the most views. So pretty cool. People are getting into prog rock again. So thanks all again for joining me. This has been yours truly, Aaron Major, here at the Square of the Circle Music channel. And I hope you all have a most excellent 2022. 2021 was pretty fun, and let's keep it real and play your music loud. Peace be with you.